This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Heretic Happy Hour, whose tagline is burning questions, not people. You know, we've been around for a long time now, and we've had many different lineups. And Heretic Happy Hour is only getting bigger and better, with guest hosts like Rainn Wilson, David Bentley Hart, John Fugelsang, Candida Moss, Elaine Pagels, and of course, December Rose. 2024 and 2025 are turning out to be our best years yet. So check us out on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's Heretic Happy Hour. We hope to see you soon.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here today. This is Not Church is the name of the podcast. I'm here with John. You want to say hi, John?
Hi, John.
Okay. Did I already say my name was Bethany?
I don't think you did.
I don't think I did. Well, hi, I'm Bethany. I'm glad to be here. Well, we've got a great guest for you today. Nat is out of town and he's not able to join us today. So it'll just be John and I holding down the fort. But just to introduce our amazing guest, we have Arundhathi Subramaniam. I'm saying it wrong. I'm so sorry. But she can correct me in a minute. She is an award-winning poet and writer on the sacred. Her 15 books include the poetry collections of Love Without a Story and the Gallery of Upside Down Women and a poetry anthology called Wild Women. She has worked over the years as a curator, critic, and poetry editor, and divides her time between New York, Mumbai, and Chennai. Am I saying that right, Chennai?
You're saying it absolutely right.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. Well, hey, welcome to the podcast. We're so glad that you're here with us today.
It's great to be here, Bethany and John. Look forward to this.
Thank you. Yeah, you have a new book out that, well, I guess it's been out for a while, but it's been republished in the United States because before that it was mostly in India. Is that correct?
That's right. It was published in India in 2021.
Okay.
And here just a couple of months ago.
Yeah. It's a beautiful cover. Women who wear only themselves for travelers on their sacred journeys. And it is absolutely a gorgeous book. Just really incredible stories that feel like they can connect with all sorts of areas of spirituality where people are at. And, but before we talk about the book, I'd love it if you just kind of introduce yourself, like maybe share with the people listening right now, what's your faith journey been like? What is spirituality like for you over your years and what brought you to today?
Wow, that's a terrific question, and I have to find a way to answer that and yet be succinct. First, let me say that your pronunciation of my name was perfect.
Oh,
we'll start with that. And how does one describe one's faith journey? Let me say I was born in Bombay, and I was born into a family that was culturally Hindu. But I would say Hindu in the sense that when I say culturally Hindu, I mean it wasn't an uppercase identity. It was very, very lowercase. You know, culturally, it was rich. You know, we celebrated the festivals. There was a room for my mother for her daily worship. That was there. There was her wonderful voice that filled the home with devotional songs. That was there. But my father was probably somewhat agnostic. And with a deep interest in Eastern philosophy. So there were books of Eastern philosophy on our bookshelves. I grew up with that, which is something I would describe as a kind of liberal Hinduism, non-dogmatic, which is to my mind the strength of Hinduism, really, at its best. And I grew very deeply interested in Buddhism somewhere in my early teens. Read a great deal of Buddhism, Taoism, Zen poetry, was later drawn to the modern day, the 20th century mystic writer, the mystics, J. Krishnamurti and Ramana Maharishi and Nisargadatta Maharaj and many more major Indian mystics of the 20th century. And then, Bethany, I think what happened at some point was the realization that poetry and philosophy were not going to be enough to answer the questions that I had. And the questions at a certain point erupted in my life. I think they had always been there in some subterranean way, but I believed that being in the arts was going to be adequate. After all, the arts were the place where you could ask all these burning life and death questions. Rilke asked them, and all my favorite poets asked them. There was just so many. But at some point, it felt like those questions were eating me up. And I think that's when a journey began that, for want of a better word, I describe as spiritual. It was a journey that was always there, but in some subterranean way. So I had to come out of the closet, at least to myself. And there followed many years of active quest when I was looking for more than just philosophy. I realized, for a guide. I was looking for active guidance. And so the closest I came to that, because I didn't have that guidance, the closest I came to that was reading the mystics. I read them all, as many as I could lay my hands on, and I was pretty omnivorous. So I read St. John of the Cross, and I read Hafiz and Rumi and Nammalvar and Kabir and Basho and Isa and so many more. There was something about the mystic poets. They seemed to come closest to speaking about an experience that I recognized. I had been through a period of what I call a kind of wordlessness. I'd been through an intense period of about a week, which I couldn't quite give an explanation for to myself. It happened in 97. And the only writers after that who made sense to me were those whose voices had the kind of hoarseness that the mystic poets brought to their poetry.
What do you mean by that? Can you share a little bit?
I think the finest poetry is not in a hurry to join the dots. It's about a kind of yearning, a nameless, wordless yearning. It's about bewilderment. It's about not being in a hurry to reach for the glib conclusion. And I sensed in the voices of those mystic poets that sense of wonderment, which is not going to ever be easily covered with language. So language doesn't come easy. Tukaram, the 17th century poet of Maharashtra in India, says, we don't waste words. So it's that words that come from a difficult place, not fluence. It's not the poetry of fluency. It's a poetry where every word is hard won. So I think I was drawn to the mystic poets in a very deep way until I met someone in 2004. I met my spiritual guide and, attended a talk and felt maybe there's some answers here that I can get. And I think my intuition proved right because I found a journey that I could call my own, a set of practices that fit a yogic path that made sense to me, where I wasn't being asked to subscribe to any set of beliefs. Instead, I just started with a non-verbal, breath-based practice that just fitted into me like a glove. So it felt right. It still feels right. Is it always enough? No. The bewilderment sometimes intensifies. The wonder is great. I'm not complaining about it. I'd say that it felt like there was a transition in 2004 when I met my guide and when the practices became mine. I feel there was a transition from being a seeker at large to a committed spiritual traveler. And that's helped me over the years.
Oh, that's amazing. No, thank you for that. And again, before we started recording, I said there was like some similarities, and I find a similarity between that and within the Christian faith of reaching out to the desert mothers and the desert fathers. And that's where I find the most truth if I want to step back into that time of faith, that's where I find it. And I find it interesting that you find it in these mystics.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this sense of, wilderness wisdom almost that isn't always captured in words as much as we would like them to be. It's like a full body holistic experience that we have to walk into in some ways. And I just think that your who you are seems like you are a person of wonder, of great curiosity. You mentioned that you had a bunch of questions that invited you into that wilderness, into seeking wisdom outside of the regular constructs that were familiar to you. What was that like to go into those spaces and seek that wisdom?
It was hard as hell, Bethany. For a long time, I felt abandoned. I think nothing new about any of that, but I felt it. You know, it's not easy when you're actually in the middle of it. And, the mystic poets can rescue you up to a point, but the journey is yours. So I think many of the things that are not original, but are deeply true, very dry, very arid, very... I felt words came from a place of habit and compulsion rather than from a place of real groundwater. And so I was searching. I was deeply homesick.
What do you mean by that? Homesick for what?
For a much deeper, truer sense of home. I grew up in Bombay, which is a city of many languages and many. India is a country of many faiths, and I'm grateful for all of it. But I often felt I had no clue where I belonged. So my early work, even my poetry, was about trying to measure that gap between where I lived and where I belonged. I had no clue where I belonged, but I knew where I didn't want to belong, culturally, politically, all of that. But where did I belong? And that question it gnawed at my innards, I think. And that's why the poem that starts the book, "Give me a home that isn't mine, where I can slip in and out of rooms without a trace, never worrying about the plumbing, the color of the curtains, the cacophony of books by the bedside, a home that I can wear lightly, where the rooms aren't clogged with yesterday's conversations, where the self doesn't bloat to fill in the crevices, a home like this body, so alien when I try to belong, so hospitable when I decide I'm just visiting." It took me a long time to write that poem.
Do you feel like that poem is still true for you?
Yes. And at the same time, I think on good days, I think it was John who talked about the good days and the not so good days. On the good days, the poem is true for me joyfully, multiple, a state of belonging that sometimes seems piecemeal on a good day can seem like an exultant state of multiple citizenship. Right? Well, that's my home. I belong here and here. Isn't that wonderful? And there, off the earth and off the sky and off from India and the US and the hermitage and the court, as I put it in one other poem. So it's wonderful, that sense of a complex identity. Those are the good days. There are days when you feel, the homesickness returns and you feel, how does one create or how does one maintain a kind of creative equipoise between these identities? You have to be in a state of creative tension, right? That's how a hyphen holds. So I'm not always a perfectly balanced hyphen.
Yeah. I mean, I relate to that. I mean, being someone who left the Christian faith and being born and raised in it.
Yeah.
There's this identity issue sometimes for me, that there are days where I long for that identity that was maybe not right for me, but was solid and stationary, and I could rely on it to a certain extent. But then the questions, right? I had all these questions and the questions weren't answered there and couldn't be answered there. So I left that part of my life behind, but I do miss it sometimes, I have to say.
Yes,
definitely. Yeah. I would love to ask you more about that, John, at some other time. It would be so great just to even know where does home look like for you now? So we should probably interview you sometime for that.
Part of that is a very similar journey to you. Is I stepped into Buddhism.
Okay.
As a place that I felt most secure. I felt most connected. You talk in here about finding the guru, but sometimes the guru is somebody who has been gone for hundreds of years. My teacher, or whatever you want to call it, it was Thich Nhat Hanh. I've never met him. Now I can't meet him. He's passed on. But I found that very, very interesting in your book also. This idea of having a guru who is 300 years gone, but still someone's guru.
Yes.
I'll let Bethany take back over. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, you're great. It just makes me think of how connected all these things are. Like spirituality is so connecting, and how, my guru, if we want to use that word, would be Jesus, and he's been gone. I mean, obviously there's the belief that he's been risen from the dead, but, he died 2,000 years ago, and still I seek after his wisdom and the words that he speaks in life. I'm just curious about that thirst that you said that you have, that sense of insatiable longing for truth, for seeking a home outside of the constructs that you were handed. And I'm curious about that, in that thirst, in that sense of wanting to be quenched, essentially, what, did you find yourself drinking from tepid or brackish pools in the process, or were you finding yourself drinking from water that was satisfying, or what was that like for you?
Brackish, and I'll say a lot of the seeming hydration I was getting was secondhand. It was secondhand wisdom. Secondhand wisdom at a certain point didn't seem to be enough. And I think that's what draws me to the mystics again and again of any persuasion. They're not speaking from secondhand experience. They're talking about a first-hand experience of spirit, or whatever you might call it. So that sense of a living experience of sacredness from which they speak, to me, that was important, not something that felt like academic wisdom, So as long as it was academic, yes, it would have been brackish, or at least tepid, as you put it. But when I found my guru, I think what I realized, and this perhaps ties in with what you both have been saying, that initially there is the great sense of exhilaration at having found someone who can address your questions, these burning questions in your life. Then you realize that what this person has actually made possible, and that's why he or she is your guru, is that they have given you a key that allows you to unlock a place within yourself that you never knew existed. So it's really about turning you around and reminding you that the groundwater is to be found within. Now, all of this I could have told you a long time ago, and I could have told myself a long time ago, but to live it is something else altogether. So I could have mouthed all the pieties because I'd done my reading a long time ago as a young adolescent even. But to actually know what it's like to turn around and start accessing your own inner groundwater was something I didn't know how to do. So I think that's really what a guru is, isn't it, John?
Yeah,
I think that's what a guru is, whoever your teacher is. The seeming gratitude towards this person is only because he or she has enabled this turning around to happen. So you're no longer then just looking out at this figure, whether dead or alive, doesn't really matter, which explains that old Buddhist, that Zen Buddhist line that if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. If you meet him outside, you kill him, which is really saying he's never going to be there. That's not where you're going to find him. The teacher will always point the way back home here.
So it's I feel like what you're saying is in the past, you could recite these things, but that's all it is. It's reciting. And the same thing with me within the Christian faith. At some point it was, I I could spout out all the things you want me to say.
Yes.
And I can sound as religious as you want me to be. But it's not coming from here. It's not coming from my heart. It's coming from my brain because I've memorized it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as a pastor, I find that so much of my role is to help people see what has already existed in and around them all along. And it's for them to be able to experience it. And as you were talking, John, it made me think of this old Hasidic tale where a rabbi would teach his disciples every day, and the students would be listening to this rabbi teach, and he would say to them every day, make sure to put these words on your heart. Make sure to put these words on your heart. And one day, one of the students said, Rabbi, you keep telling us to put these words on our heart. Why do you say that? And he said, well, I ask you to put them on your heart. So when your heart will finally break, all those words will fall in. And sometimes the things that we learn along the way, the things that we're learning in books and education and from other people, and we haven't experienced it for ourselves. Oftentimes we don't experience things until our heart breaks, until we go through something that's a form of suffering and difficulty. And all the things that we've learned can help us move into a different state of being. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes that's not helpful, and they just feel like those words were useless. But I think sometimes it can be helpful.
I'd agree with that. I'm a believer in the power of the word, which is why I'm still with poetry. Though words deserted me during that strange 97 experience that I spoke of, when they returned differently. And I think, as I say in the introduction to the book, when words began to return, they returned to me as songs of bewilderment and songs of freedom. So the texture of the poetry, my own work, began to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Words can be a wonderful word and pause together. A really judicious mix of both can be a wonderful way to point to the moon. To me, that's what the book is about too. Those 4 women, the essays on those 4 women, to me, in their own utterly diverse ways, and they represent such a plurality of spiritual practices. But in those utterly diverse ways, they are pointing to the moon. And they don't let us settle. The story is a pointer. Each of those stories is a pointer. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. All 4 stories are great. They're so different. They're on different journeys. But at the same time, like you said, there's some similarities in all of them. This idea of abandoning religion or religiosity for the sacred or the divine is one of the things I feel like goes through all 4 of the stories.
Yes, absolutely right. And at the same time, some of them return to go back to the point that Bethany was making, they return to some of the cultural terminology that is associated with their respective faith backgrounds. But it is a new reclaimed terminology now. It's no longer just a mealy-mouthed, lukewarm language. It's now a molten, living language for them.
You talk about with Lati Mani, is that how you say her name?
Lata, yeah.
Lata, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
She said in this, I was not looking for the divine, she came looking for me. And that just really resonated so deeply where, like this person had such a deep, profound experience, almost like she had to get to that place of release in order to receive. What was that? Has that been similar to your experience in some ways, this release in order to receive?
Yeah, I think I realized how much unlearning I needed to do in order to learn truly how to receive. And I began to learn about myself as a student as well. I realized that I learn best when I am deeply relaxed, and yet relaxation is not just about a state of indulgence. You're relaxed, but very, very present. And I think that happens to me when I'm surrounded by anything that I love. I like to marinate in it. I like to immerse myself in it. And it never feels like penance. It just feels like the most natural thing there is to be doing what you love, to be surrounded by what you love. That was what took me to poetry at the start. And much later in my life, I realized that's how meditation happened for me. not because I was whipping myself into a state of solemn, I wasn't putting on my mantle, my self-conscious mantle of meditator and saying, now I've got to look solemn and poor-faced and sit down and do my penance. It happened to me because the practices made it possible. The practices themselves were a thing of joy and remain to me deeply energizing. So meditation happens naturally, seamlessly, on the good days. That's how it happens.
Yeah, I resonate with that as well. I mean, with Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the things that I learned from him was, because I had this idea and I tried to force meditation. I tried to force myself into a meditative state, and it never worked.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I've tried to sit the right way, put my hands in the right place. And then he's like, if you need to lay down, lay down.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to sit in a way that makes you more comfortable, sit in a way that makes you feel more comfortable.
Mm.
And it was this breaking of what I thought was the right way, quote unquote, the right way, that allowed me to find a place where that meditation worked and
That's
didn't feel forced and didn't feel fake. Right? Yeah.
I think, John, I often, draw a parallel between this and my own experience with literature, with poetry. There is often a phase where you think, just because I love words and just because I'm having deep experiences, I must be a poet. And you're not. So just spontaneity and what you think of as originality does not make you a poet. At the same time, then you go into a phase of discipline, intense discipline, learning, reading widely, deeply, sometimes academically, reading all the poets you love, trying to find out why the poems work. And this can lead to what I sometimes call the self-conscious phase. The earlier one is the unconscious phase, when you just think you're writing and, you're enjoying it, and without any real awareness of what it entails. Then comes this very self-conscious phase when you're actually quoting and trying to sound like those you admire, and frequently you end up sounding like those you despise. But that's another matter. You're trying very hard.
Yeah.
And then comes the time when you sort of settle in. Because you've spent so much time around words, your craft holds you in good stead on the bad days. And on the good days, you're riding hands-free on air, as I say in one poem. There's that sense of, it's happening. I don't have to, grit my teeth too hard to make it happen.
Yeah, I write poetry. The book I published has a poem for each chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people think that a poet is someone who just writes words and just makes sure they rhyme, and then that's it. It's like, no, there's work involved. There's editing involved. I'll go back to a poem and was like, that, I don't know why I wrote it like that. That doesn't make any sense at all. I'll change it. But I think a lot of people have this idea that poets, it just, and on a good day,
it happens.
It happens.
It happens.
Where they flow. But there are days where you're writing and it's just, and it takes a little bit of extra work to make that poem make sense to use, to make sense to others.
And I'm actually saying too that magic of the poem that just seems to happen, and the hard manual labor on the other days, when those two align, magic and manual labor, something very special happens. And I think for me, my understanding of my spiritual journey has not been so different. Having a daily practice can sometimes feel, oh my God, do I really want to get up and do this again today? There are moments you feel that way. But having that practice, the dailiness of it, has helped me enormously. So I feel that the alignment of these two is very important, and they're not as polarized as they seem. We often think that the good days are the days when we don't have to try, and the bad days are the days when we're sitting in the workshop sweating blood. But actually, sitting in that workshop surrounded by words and word shavings and, other books and so on, for a poet can actually be a time of great joy. It doesn't have to be grim penance at all. So I think the workshop space and that space of magic, when they come together, you're in a good place.
Yeah, it's like all those parts exist together.
Yes.
The hard parts, the good parts, the easy parts, the difficult parts, all of them create all of it. And no one just arrives one day as this magnificent poet who is finally at one within themselves and home within themselves. It usually takes a lot of gritty determination and continual dedication, to get to a place where things actually do flow without as much stoppage, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love the term that you used at the beginning of your book in your preface. You talked about that you belong to the tribe of the bewildered. And that just resonated so deeply with me because I am a person who loves to be in awe and to be able to breathe deeply and open my eyes to the wonder of all things and to be deeply curious about life and people and not to be closed off, even though sometimes I am. What does that mean to you to belong to the tribe of the bewildered? Do you have when you say tribe, do you mean this great multitude of people past and present that have come before you and walk alongside you now? Or is it a group of people that do walk alongside you now today? What does that look like?
Well, the Dead Poets Society has been useful for sure.
Yes.
But no, I think it's the moments that you have with people, unguarded moments that you share with people at times. And I found that happening more and more in my life. And I'm deeply grateful for that. The moments when people just allow themselves to be vulnerable. And when people are vulnerable, you are in that place of deep bewilderment. You really don't know how the hell you're going to get out of this. You don't have you're not talking from a place of conclusion, nor are you talking even from a place of conviction. You're talking from a place of not knowing. And that not knowing, I realize, was what had drawn me to art and to poetry as a child. But it was overlaid as I grew up, as education happened, it was overlaid by the need to sound clever. Isn't it? I think that's perhaps familiar to more than, to some of us. There's a need to sound clever. There's the need to also proffer your opinion to be, acceptable at dinner table conversations or at a party. You've got to sound like you know. And all of that at some point in my life was cracked open when I realized I did not know. And there followed those many years of quest, which were for me in some ways a time of great indignity, because it meant going to people whom you don't necessarily want to go to, but you have to say, I don't know. And is there something that you have to offer? Can I check this out? Can I explore this? So it meant eating humble pie in a way.
Yes. Yeah. That posture of humility is, it's like when we come into spaces with people and we come as a learner and as a participant instead of wanting to be right all the time. Or yesterday at church, I was teaching a message about how often we want to have the last word and we want to prove ourselves or in some sort of capacity, and it all comes down to two things. I think one is the belief that we're better than somebody else, and that's why we need the last word. But oftentimes that comes from a place of deep insecurity and almost a self-hatred that can exist within a person. Have you lived in those spaces of insecurity, and what does it look like for you to be in what you called being relaxed, being in that state of just humility?
I've certainly been in places of acute not knowing and then wanting to camouflage that with, with cleverness, as I said earlier. In fact, it takes me to what we were even talking about just a few minutes ago with John. There is a beautiful story in the Buddhist tradition, which you might know of, and it actually relates to what you said just now too. The Buddha apparently talked to one of his monks who said, I just don't know how to make this happen. He was in a state of consternation. How do I make this work? I don't seem to be getting it. And the Buddha reminded the monk of the fact that he'd been a musician before he joined the order. And he said, when you played your instrument, the veena, do you remember that the strings could never be too taut or too lax? If they're too taut, the string breaks. If it's too lax, there's no music. You've got to have them fine-tuned. And I think in many ways, that for me, when I first read that story, I felt it was a deep pointer to the way I needed to be leading my life. That is, you keep the discipline going, but you don't become some kind of joyless ascetic. And at the same time, you keep you have the joy going and all of that, but you don't allow yourself to just become a kind of flabby, self-indulgent, lotus eater either. So it's about the two. You're constantly fine-tuning the instrument of the self. To me, that's what yoga gives me on a daily basis. A way to fine-tune the instrument that is the self, which includes the body, it includes the mind, it includes the breath, all of it.
Would you say that that's how you cultivate spirituality in your life today? Is through yoga?
Yes, very much through yoga. And it's the path that I follow is what's called Isha Yoga. Sadhguru was my guru, has been my guru. And I think the practices that he offered me, just this blend of what's called Kriya Yoga and meditation, that has worked well for me. It's helped me enormously.
That's beautiful. I love that. What is something that tends to energize you, or what is something that tends to drain you in your spiritual practices?
In my spiritual practices?
Or even in your life?
I think, a lot of conversation that is in any way contrived or forced or, that can be very, very draining. I like people. I enjoy people, but I can I can feel my energy is draining. And I feel the conversation isn't coming from, a deeper place within the self when they aren't talking about something that matters to them. So I think that I do find draining. But I do like people, so I'm not as misanthropic as I once thought I was. But I like it when conversations feel real. What else do I find draining? Well, I think I remember my guru saying this at one point, when I was asked, oh my God, do I have to keep doing this practice every day? I mean, the sheer drudgery of doing a practice every day can be, when you think about it, it can seem oppressive. And I remember him saying, no, you don't have to do it every day. You just have to do it today. And to me, that shifted something for me. And I realized I don't feel drained if I just have to do this today.
Oh, that is such good wisdom. I love that. I love that. I feel like as human beings in general, but maybe just Western thinkers, I find that so many people find their thought patterns going to the past, like former regrets and things that are just hard to let go of. And then, or they're like, worried about the future and really focused on what's coming next and anxious about all sorts of things that we future trip on.
Yes.
And I think like having that mindset of just for today, just for today.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that for work. Yeah. When I wake up, I was like, do I have to go to work every day?
No,
just today.
Just today.
I love it. I love that.
I know,
yeah, that's really
helps me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that help you stay present to the moment? Like, are you a very present person?
I don't know, Bethany. It's a hard one to describe. I think I'm present with people. When I'm with people, I'm quite present to them. My thoughts can play havoc with me too. But I feel I've been given the tools to work with myself, the tools to bring my thoughts back. Meditation is a wonderful way. So I don't feel as unanchored and unmoored as I was before 2004, before I had practices that helped me to return to myself. So of course I forget, but then I also return.
Do you get to share some of those practices with the people in your life? Like, do people come to you for spiritual guidance beyond your books and poetry? Like, are they knocking on your door and like, will you teach me?
Well, in some ways, I will say that because my own writing changed, Bethany, at a certain point, I realized that the binary that seemed to exist, where I was a poet in one sphere and I was this writer on spirituality in another, that's blurring much more now. So I feel very often that when I do live events, that one is inviting people to a place of presence, really, whether it's through word, through the poem or through the pause. One is inviting others and the self to inhabit that place which is the source, which is the source of all the octane that language derives its energy from. That place, which is latent and very alive, that's what we're all seeking, isn't it? I didn't know that that's what I was seeking. I thought I was looking for the meaning of life and that it would come to me in some verbal terms. This is the meaning of life. You realize somewhere along the way it's not going to, at least I realized that that's not what I was really looking for. And I think I read an interview with, must have been an interview with Joseph Campbell. I think he did an interview with, it'll come back to me, but I remember in that interview, he says, and he puts it beautifully, he says that one often believes one is looking for the meaning of life, and then you discover that you're actually looking for a deeper, fuller, more intense experience of life itself. And I think that to me is what my spiritual path points me to. Not to get caught up with belief and with words and with opinions and with doctrine, but to go to what are you really seeking? You're seeking that great sense of aliveness, which is, at that time you belong effortlessly. There's no question of where home is. You belong effortlessly to source. You belong deeply to yourself. You're anchored in yourself.
Wow. That's that's beautiful. It reminds me a little bit of this idea of searching for certainty and realizing that certainty isn't the answer, but uncertainty is the answer. And living within the uncertainty is a much healthier place to be. At least for me.
Yeah, I agree completely. In fact, I remember being asked at one point how I described or defined spirituality. And I think this is the closest I came, John. I said, it is a spirited response to uncertainty. Uncertainty doesn't go away. If anything, your experience of it only intensifies.
And I don't remember which chapter it is, but it gives you permission to say when someone asks you a question and you can answer it with, I don't know. And that is an honest and okay response.
Well, there's so many opportunities for greater connection beyond yourself or beyond the belief system that you were handed when you can see that uncertainty is more open-handed in so many ways. Like all of a sudden, goodness and truth and light and joy and love come from every direction throughout the universe, all over the place, just like bouncing here and there, instead of held in one belief system or in one dogmatic way of thinking. Because the minute that we say that this is the certainty, this is exactly what you're supposed to believe, we shut everything else off, including human connection, which is the way the Christian church has been run for years and years. Yeah. And I'm wondering, in your journeys, in your search for home, where else did you end up going location-wise? Like, I know that you went to India and you found a lot of your own awakening there. Was there other places around the globe that you found awakenings?
Actually, Bethany, I didn't go to India. I was in India and I just continued being there, really. I came to the US much more recently. I came to the US only in 2018, so it's very recent in my life. Geographically, India is just so varied. So almost every place is a place of pilgrimage, if you will.
Yeah, right.
I mean, yes, I was a thirsty seeker at one time, wandering India, going to all the places that are considered to be sacred trails. I've done that. I even wrote a book called Pilgrims India, which is an anthology of sacred journeys by believers and unbelievers and agnostics. And I wanted everyone in there. Because essentially, Bethany, and that actually brings me to the spirit of this book too. I think to me what the spirituality of India represents at its best is a great capaciousness it is really a plurality of wisdom traditions. To me, to be able to acknowledge that has been very important, particularly because otherwise we just allow ourselves to have our fates ironed out and flattened, by vested interests. But if you really were to look at the spirituality of the subcontinent, it is such a welter of wisdom traditions, contemplative, ecstatic. Even the women in this book are on such different paths. One is a woman of the head, the other is a woman of the heart. One is on the path of yoga, Nada yoga, which is the yoga of sound. The other is on the path of tantra, which works deeply with the body. A third is on the path of bhakti, which is devotion. So they're all very different temperamentally and in terms of their spiritual practices. One is a monk and the other is a woman who says she's derived a great deal from her consort practice. And that's how her spirituality evolved. So just the sheer staggering plurality, that can be accommodated within this broad rubric that we call Hindu. To me, that was something worth talking about. Not flattening it into some kind of flag-waving religious identity, not like that. But to really look at it as living, breathing traditions of today, living traditions. Not traditions of the past.
How do you think, and maybe this is too big of a question for today, but I'm curious about, maybe I just need to do my own research, but how do you think India and Hinduism got to that place of such openness and accessibility for multiple ways of thinking? How did that happen?
It's a wonderful question. And I think, how it happened is really it's something worth exploring. But I think what has happened is this particular subcontinent that seems to have actually becomes a geographical entity because of the mountains in the north and the water bodies on all three sides. In many ways, it was a place that allowed, until invasions started happening, it was a place that allowed for great spiritual exploration. So even when you read, as John has, I'm sure, of the Buddha 2,500 years ago, we are told that at the time that the Buddha was seeking, he had multiple paths to choose from. There were the Charvakas, the Ajivakas, all kinds of, the non-dualists. It was a welter of traditions, even in his time. So I think the interesting thing about what this whole spiritual culture is that it was a culture that emphasized looking for your freedom. It wasn't about looking for belief or dogma. It was about how do we find our freedom and find it responsibly? How do we find it? So I think it has been all the traditions that have arisen in that part of the world are oriented towards freedom, whether you call it nirvana or moksha or mukti, doesn't matter. It's all about freedom.
That's beautiful. That's very cool. I love hearing that. I've never been to India. I'd love to visit someday. And
it's crazy
there. Yeah, I've heard.
Crazy and quite unmatched and unique and special.
Yeah. I had a housemate who was from Mumbai, and he's back there again now. But I would love to visit him someday there. He told me the same. It's a lot. It is a lot to take in. Yeah.
It can drive you crazy. It can also drive you to the sacred. What can I say?
Yeah. I'm curious, you've had all these questions throughout your life, and you've sought after answers, or at least the experiences, maybe even not the answers, but the experiences that come about from those questions. And you've been a seeker, you've been a curious person, you love the sense of being filled with wonder and bewilderment. What questions are you working through now in your life? Or do you feel like there's less questions and more just a settled space?
I'd like to find a way to be anchored in this space of not knowing, to be more deeply anchored in it. So my questions are less about, how do I do it and all of that, as much as there is a way, but I'd like to be more deeply anchored in it. And to find a way to be completely integrated, really, on that level, to be able to come from that place, whatever I'm doing, whether it's having a conversation with you, whether it's sitting consciously and meditating, or whether it's, enjoying a coffee with a friend, whatever it is, I want to be able to come from that place. So to make that more deeply, more enduringly mine.
Do you ever get frustrated that you're not arriving there as quickly as you want? Or is that just all part of the process?
I think we're back to good days and bad days, aren't we? I'll say that the good days, the bad days don't happen as often as I remember them happening pre-2004. So, which is what convinces me that I'm on a path that's working for me. Because the practices are my way of grounding and of being anchored more deeply in myself. I don't have questions about the practices. I do have periodically on those days when you feel, how am I going to just come from here, from this place of centeredness? Can I always relate to the world and to myself from this place of centeredness? That question comes back. But I don't have questions about the practice.
I know, like, my bad days are, I have a 35, 40-minute drive to work. And I can tell the days that I did not prepare myself correctly. When I get in my car and I take my drive and my anxiety comes up, and just the questions of how am I going to make it through the day are the days that I was like, I didn't do what I'm supposed. And again, I don't want to make it sound like it's like something you have to do, but there's this journey, right? And, like finding that place of mindfulness, finding that place of the breath to prepare for the 40-minute drive into work and then having to do the work. Those are the days where I'm like, okay, this is the day that I need to slow down. And even in my car, that's, like I said before, finding a place where you don't have to be in a specific spot. Okay, I'm in my car and I found out that I'm not ready. Find my spot, find my place, even while I'm driving.
Yeah, it's like a conscious choice in a lot of ways. I choose to prepare myself in the ways that I know that my body and my mind and my spirit need, so I can be my full self when I arrive. And it is a choice, but eventually, like, at least what I found is if I choose to step into those spaces often enough, it becomes less of a choice and more of a way of being. And I always just feel like it just feels so good when it becomes regular. And not to say that it can't, there's things that happen in my day that set me off and that disrupt the flow, and I get really distracted on who I am and what I'm meant to be and how I'm meant to even exist in this world, that just happens. But the more I choose to release and breathe, the more I can come back to that place. But yeah. I like that on your drive, John, that you get to like set the course for your day in those times, that you get to like really settle into that space.
It's taken a long time to get there though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It takes a long time to get there. And the wretched thing is that getting there has to be done every single day,
Yeah, right.
You can't just get there and lock yourself in.
Yeah.
Well, and I think some people are just, their brains and bodies and spirits are just designed differently than others. Some can get to those spaces way easier than others. And, I'm reminded of like going to the gym. Some people's bodies, if they go to the gym, are just built to like build muscle. They're just like, it's like they're designed to put muscle on easily, to keep muscle on easily. And other people have to work so hard to get the same results that somebody else doesn't have to work as hard for. And it doesn't mean that we can't all get there. It's just that the journey there is longer for some than others, or takes more intention than others.
Yeah. And at the same time, I think that whoever we are, if we are able to align our bodies and minds and hearts and our breath, and, the alignment is about as much as we can work on. The rest really is not of our doing. That's all we do. We just align and we receive. That's the antenna that the human system, I think, is. You are it's a magnificent instrument, as these wonderful women mystics remind us of again and again. It's a wonderful instrument of the sacred. It's not an impediment that has to be cast aside in any way. But I think also when that alignment happens, each one discovers their own brilliance. And I do believe that each one comes to this life with some kind of brilliance, and it's not always in the same thing. It's not all of us will have those perfect bodies that some seem to acquire with such ease at the gym. But each one comes with something that makes them so dazzlingly themselves. And I think that comes to the fore when this alignment happens.
And I see that in this book with all four of these women. They all have come to themselves in their own specific way.
That's right.
And they are amazing human beings for who they are and what they bring to the table. I don't have a question in that, just a statement of how well this is written. And at least that's something I took from it.
Yeah, the way that you elevate these women, their stories, their experiences, how their experiences shaped you and how you came as like a learner in their wisdom is just absolutely beautiful. I feel like I could read this again and again and just continually soak in the experience that you had of their experience, that it's all connected. So thank you for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Arundhathi, it's absolutely beautiful. And you wrote an incredible book. Are you working on anything next, or is there a place that people can find your work beyond books and find what you're up to? Yeah.
I am on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm on arundhatisubramaniam.com. That's the website. I have a book of poems that's just out, women, the Gallery of Upside Down Women. And that's because some of these women mystics whom I've been archiving for the past decade almost inevitably leaked into my own poetry. So they're there, and I think they remind me, at least, that in an upside down world, if you have upside down women, they're actually the right side up. So it feels like those are songs of freedom and sanity as far as I'm concerned. And I'd like to be reading more from that book in the coming year as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
And everybody who's listening, you can find her book in our show notes and anything else that we will post in there, so you can be in contact with this incredible woman. So thank you so much for being with us today. John, did you have any last thoughts before we close up?
No, just again, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. This has been an amazing conversation that I have enjoyed immensely.
Yes.
Likewise.
Yes.
Truly. Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.